cafe was small and always busy, a place where the clinking of dishes and the murmur of conversations filled the air. She moved quickly between tables, carrying trays full of cups and plates, always careful not to spill a drop. Every day felt the same, yet every day was also a little harder than the last. The tips were small, the customers often impatient, and the hours were long. Still, she worked with a quiet determination, knowing she had bills to pay and a family counting on her. Despite her busy days, there was a side to her that few people knew about. When the cafe was empty in the evening and the soft light from the street lamp touched the polished floor, she would sit at the corner piano. It was an old instrument, slightly worn, but it held a magic that she could bring out with her hands. Her fingers would glide over the keys, and suddenly the world outside the cafe seemed to disappear. The stress of work, the harsh words of some customers, the exhaustion, all of it melted away when she played. She had loved music for as long as she could remember. Her mother had given her piano lessons when she was a child, and even though their money was always tight, they had found a way to buy an old, second-hand piano. It had been battered and scratched, but to her, it was a treasure. Every note she learned felt like a little victory, a promise that there was something bigger for her in life than just waiting tables. Her coworkers often didn't understand her. They would tease her when she hummed a tune under her breath or when she talked about music. Some of them even laughed at her dreams, saying she should focus on real work and stop wasting time with imaginary ideas. But she kept going, knowing that music was the one place where she felt truly alive. When her hands touched the keys, she felt powerful in a way that no job could ever give her. There were days when the customers were especially harsh. People would complain about the food, the service, or even her smile. Some would make jokes about how quiet she was, how she seemed lost in her own world. She learned to smile politely and keep moving, to take the insults lightly, even though inside they stung. She reminded herself that their opinions did not define her. Her talent was real even if no one else could see it yet. Every now and then someone would notice. A kind regular would comment on her grace or the way she handled the busy cafe without losing her composure. Those small words of encouragement kept her going. They were like tiny sparks in a dark room, moments that reminded her that maybe, just maybe, one day people would see more than just the waitress. They would see the musician inside. At home, she would practice late into the night. The small apartment she shared with her family had thin walls, but they never complained about the music. Sometimes her younger sibling would fall asleep listening to her play, their breathing slow and calm as the melodies filled the room. Her parents would sometimes peek in, smiling quietly at the dedication in her eyes, proud of her even if they could not fully understand the dreams she carried. She had learned to be patient. Life had not handed her opportunities on a silver platter, and she knew that it probably never would. But she also knew that talent like hers could not stay hidden forever. Every note she practiced, every song she learned, was a step toward the moment when someone would finally recognize her gift. Until then, she worked, she played, and she held on to hope. The cafe often hosted events for wealthy clients who came in for private parties or business meetings. She would watch them arrive in their fancy clothes, carrying themselves with confidence and authority. They never looked her way, and if they did, it was often with a dismissive glance. She imagined what it would be like to perform in front of people like that, to see the surprise on their faces when they realized that the quiet waitress they had overlooked was capable of something extraordinary. Her friends would sometimes ask her why she put up with the long hours and the rude customers. "Why not just give up?" they would say. But she always shook her head. She could not give up. Music was a part of her soul, and she refused to let it be ignored. Each day, she carried herself with quiet pride, even when the world around her seemed determined to belittle her. One evening, as she wiped down the tables after the last customers had left, she allowed herself a moment of daydreaming. She imagined a stage, bright lights shining down on her as she played. The audience would sit in rapt attention, completely captivated by the music she created. She could almost hear the applause, feel the admiration, and see the disbelief on their faces. In that moment, she smiled to herself. It was a secret smile, one that no one else in the cafe could see. It was a smile that promised herself that she would not be stopped. The cafe's piano, though old and slightly out of tune, became her sanctuary. Every key held a story, every melody a memory. She poured her heart into each practice session, playing pieces that spoke of longing, hope, and determination. Sometimes she would close her eyes, letting the music guide her fingers, losing herself in a world far away from the stress of waiting tables and harsh words. In those moments, she felt free, powerful, and unstoppable. Even though she had not yet performed in front of a real audience, she was ready. She just needed the right moment, the right opportunity. And she believed that one day that moment would come. The ridicule of the world would not stop her. The disbelief of others would not define her. She knew who she was and what she was capable of, and that knowledge gave her strength. And so, she continued her days with quiet determination, moving through the cafe with grace and patience, while keeping her secret dream alive. She served customers with a smile, brushed off the harsh words, and played her heart out in the quiet moments when no one was watching. Each day was a step closer to the moment when her talent would finally be seen, a moment that would change everything. The world might mock her for now, but she knew that one day, they would have no choice but to listen, to be amazed, and to recognize the extraordinary musician hidden behind the apron of a humble waitress. The next morning, the cafe opened like any other day. The sun shone through the windows, and the smell of fresh coffee mixed with baked bread filled the air. She moved around the cafe with her usual careful steps, greeting regulars with a polite smile and serving new customers with quiet patience. Everything seemed ordinary, but today, something unusual was about to happen. A well-dressed man entered the cafe, his shoes tapping lightly on the wooden floor. He looked around, surveying the room with sharp eyes. He was not there for the coffee or the pastries. He came for something else, something that he sensed but could not explain. He watched her move between tables, noticing the grace in her actions, the focus in her eyes, and the quiet strength she carried without saying a word. She did not know it yet, but he had already been drawn to her, intrigued by something more than the surface. He sat down at a corner table and waited, sipping his coffee slowly as he observed the cafe. She served him with the same polite smile, unaware of the silent judgment and curiosity he carried. After a few minutes, he asked about the piano in the corner. She smiled softly and explained that it was often unused during the day but sometimes played in the evenings when the cafe was quiet. He leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with interest. He mentioned a private event he was organizing, a gathering of people who appreciated talent and art, and asked if she would consider playing the piano there. She felt a rush of excitement and fear all at once. Her hands trembled slightly, and her heart beat faster. The thought of performing in front of strangers, especially such influential people, was both thrilling and terrifying. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready. The cafe had always been a safe place for her music, a sanctuary where she could play freely without judgment. Performing in front of an audience, people who could either praise or reject her, was a different challenge entirely. She thought of her family, her friends, and the long hours she spent serving tables. Could she really step into a world that had always seemed so far away, a world that had never noticed her before? Her friends, who were sitting at their usual table during the morning rush, noticed her sudden distraction. They asked her what was wrong, and when she explained, their faces lit up with excitement. They encouraged her, reminding her of the talent she had spent years nurturing in secret. They told her that this was her chance, a moment that could change everything. Their words lifted a weight from her shoulders, giving her a sense of courage she had not felt before. Meanwhile, some of her co-workers were less enthusiastic. They had always been quick to mock her quiet nature and her love for music. When they heard about the invitation, they laughed and made jokes, assuming she would fail or make a fool of herself. Their ridicule stung, but she ignored it. She had learned long ago that the opinions of others did not define her, and this time was no different. She focused on the opportunity, determined to make the most of it. Over the next few days, she practiced tirelessly. She spent every spare moment at the cafe piano, perfecting her pieces, making sure each note was clear and precise. She imagined the audience at the event, their expressions, their reactions, and used that image to drive her practice. Sometimes she played until her fingers ached, until her eyes were tired, but she did not stop. Every note was a step closer to the day when she would finally reveal her talent to the world. Her family watched her with quiet pride. They could see the determination in her eyes, the passion in her hands. They encouraged her to follow this opportunity, reminding her that talent like hers should not remain hidden. Her younger sibling would peek into the room while she practiced, eyes wide with admiration, and sometimes clap softly at the end of a piece. Their support became a source of strength for her, helping her push past the fear and doubt that sometimes crept in. As the day of the event approached, the cafe seemed to hum with anticipation, even though no one else knew the significance of the upcoming performance. She went about her work, serving coffee and pastries with the same calm demeanor, but inside, her mind was busy with melodies and harmonies, thinking of how she would introduce herself to the world in a way that could not be ignored. On the morning of the event, she arrived early at the venue, a spacious and elegant hall filled with polished wood floors, sparkling chandeliers, and comfortable seats arranged neatly for the audience. The air smelled faintly of fresh flowers and polished furniture, and the soft light from the windows highlighted the grandeur of the room. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness as she stepped inside, carrying the weight of her dreams and fears with her. The event organizer, the man from the cafe, greeted her warmly and guided her to the piano. He offered words of encouragement, telling her to play with her heart and trust her talent. She nodded, grateful for his support, and took a deep breath. The piano was even more beautiful than the one at the cafe, its black and white keys gleaming under the soft lighting. She sat down, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingers, and allowed herself a brief moment to imagine the music flowing from her hands. Backstage, she noticed the other performers and guests, some of whom were well-known musicians and artists. Their presence was intimidating, and she felt a moment of doubt. Could she, a simple waitress, really stand among such talent and hold her own? She reminded herself of the years she had spent practicing in secret, the countless nights and early mornings, and the unwavering passion that had fueled her every move. She was ready, and she knew it deep inside. When the time came, she was introduced to the audience. She walked to the piano with steady steps, her hands trembling slightly but her heart strong. The whispers and curious glances from the crowd did not shake her. She had faced ridicule before, and this was no different. She lifted her hands over the keys, closed her eyes for a moment, and let the first note resonate through the hall. The sound was pure and clear, filling the room with a warmth that seemed to settle over the audience. As she continued to play, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys, the initial whispers and doubt faded. Every note, every chord, told a story of hope, struggle, and determination. The audience was drawn in, captivated by the music, and even the most skeptical faces softened with surprise and admiration. In that moment, she realized that all the mockery, all the long hours, and all the struggles had led to this. The music was her voice, and it spoke louder than words ever could. The event, once intimidating and uncertain, became a space where she belonged. The applause that followed her first piece was like a wave of validation, confirming that her talent was real and undeniable. She smiled, feeling a sense of triumph and relief that she had never known before. As the event continued, she played piece after piece, each one more confident than the last. She lost herself in the music, forgetting the audience, the venue, and the past ridicule. All that mattered was the connection she felt through the piano, the ability to move hearts and minds with her hands. The event organizer watched proudly, knowing that he had witnessed the birth of something extraordinary. When the final note faded and the applause erupted, she stood and took a modest bow. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, and she felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The ridicule of the past seemed distant and irrelevant. For the first time, she was seen, truly seen, not as a waitress, but as the musician she had always been. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the cafe, beyond the doubts, and into a world where her music could inspire and touch countless lives. The day of the event arrived, and the atmosphere in the hall was electric. The guests began arriving in small clusters, some chatting quietly while others found their seats. She could feel the tension in the air, not from fear, but from anticipation. People were curious about the young woman who had been invited to play, some skeptical and some hopeful, but none of them knew what to expect. She adjusted her dress and ran her fingers over the piano keys, taking a moment to center herself. As she looked out over the audience, she noticed a few familiar faces from the cafe. Regular customers, some coworkers, and a few friends had come to see her perform. Their eyes were wide with curiosity and surprise, and she could sense the silent judgments from a few skeptics. Some whispered among themselves, not hiding their doubts. A few of them had once mocked her for humming while serving coffee or for dreaming too big. They had expected her to stumble, to falter, or to show herself as ordinary. She felt the weight of their gaze, but she refused to let it shake her. The event organizer stepped forward and introduced her to the audience. The room grew quiet as she made her way to the piano. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she reminded herself of all the years she had spent practicing, the countless nights at home and in the cafe where she had nurtured her talent in secret. She sat down on the piano bench, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. For a brief moment, the world outside disappeared, leaving only the music and her connection to it. The first note she played was soft, almost tentative, but it carried a clarity that demanded attention. The sound filled the room and drew the listeners in. She played slowly at first, allowing the melody to unfold naturally, letting the music speak for her. Her fingers danced over the keys, telling stories of hope, struggle, and determination. The audience shifted in their seats, leaning in, captivated by the unexpected depth and emotion in her performance. A few guests who had been skeptical whispered to one another, unable to hide their surprise. They had expected something simple, perhaps even clumsy, but what they heard was far beyond what they had imagined. Her playing was confident, expressive, and precise. Every note seemed to carry a piece of her journey. The long hours of work, the ridicule she had endured, and the dreams she had held close to her heart. It was as if the piano had become an extension of herself, telling the story that words could not. As she continued, the audience became silent, utterly absorbed in the music. The whispers stopped, replaced by an intense focus on her hands and the melody they created. Even the harshest critics could not look away. The beauty of her performance was undeniable, a force that transcended the judgments they had made before she began to play. Her expression was calm, yet filled with emotion, showing a depth that resonated with everyone listening. She moved through the pieces she had prepared, each one telling a different story. Some were soft and delicate, like a gentle breeze passing through a quiet garden. Others were powerful and commanding, full of energy and passion. Each transition showcased her skill and her ability to evoke emotion through music. The audience was mesmerized, their earlier doubts completely forgotten. She could feel the room responding to her, the energy shifting as the crowd became one with the music. In the back of the hall, a few of the wealthy patrons exchanged glances. They had seen many performances before, but something about this young woman was different. She did not perform for attention or applause. She performed with authenticity, with a heart that spoke directly to anyone who listened. Her music was not just notes on a page. It was a story, her story, and it moved everyone in the room. Among the guests were musicians who had played in grand concert halls and studied at prestigious schools. They watched in awe, whispering to each other about the surprising talent before them. It was clear to them that this was someone extraordinary, someone whose gift had been hidden in plain sight. The idea that she had been ridiculed in her everyday life seemed almost absurd now, considering the brilliance of her performance. She noticed a few familiar faces in the audience, those who had mocked her in the past. They sat frozen, their expressions a mix of shock, disbelief, and admiration. They could not hide their surprise. The quiet waitress they had laughed at was now commanding the room with her music. Every note she played seemed to erase the memory of their ridicule, replacing it with awe and respect. It was a moment of vindication, though she did not focus on them. Her music was not for revenge. It was for expression, for sharing her talent with the world. As she played, she allowed herself to remember the long nights of practice, the times she had doubted herself, and the small moments of encouragement from her family and friends. Each memory fueled her, giving her the courage to continue, to play with her full heart. The piano became a bridge between her past struggles and her present triumph, a symbol of how perseverance and dedication could overcome ridicule and doubt. The event continued, and she introduced subtle variations in her pieces, showing her creativity and mastery. The audience was captivated not only by her technical skill but also by the emotional depth she brought to each performance. She did not rush through the music. She allowed it to breathe, to move naturally, letting every note resonate. By the time she reached the final piece, the room was completely silent, every ear attuned to her playing. When the last note faded into the air, there was a brief moment of stillness. The audience sat in awe, absorbing the impact of what they had just witnessed. Then, one by one, applause began to fill the room, starting quietly and building into a thunderous ovation. Some guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, unable to contain their admiration. She took a modest bow, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and joy. This was the moment she had dreamed of for so long, the moment that made every hardship worthwhile. The event organizer came forward, smiling widely, his eyes filled with pride. He congratulated her, telling her that she had surpassed everyone's expectations and had left a lasting impression on the audience. She thanked him quietly, still absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened. The applause continued, echoing through the hall, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest, a validation that her talent was real and powerful. After the performance, several guests approached her to offer praise and encouragement. Some invited her to perform at other events, while others expressed their admiration for her dedication and skill. She listened politely, feeling a sense of humility mixed with pride. The recognition she had longed for had finally arrived, and it was overwhelming in the most beautiful way. As she left the stage and returned backstage, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The fear and anticipation that had accompanied her earlier had vanished, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and confidence. She realized that this was only the beginning, that her journey as a musician had just begun, and that the world outside the cafe was ready to hear her story through the piano. That night, as she returned home, she could not stop thinking about the performance. She replayed every note in her mind, every expression, every moment of connection with the audience. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her talent had finally been seen and appreciated. The ridicule of the past no longer mattered. It was a distant memory, replaced by the admiration and respect she had earned. The journey had been long, but the reward was greater than she could have imagined. The day after the event, the cafe seemed different, almost alive with the whispers of what had happened. Customers who had heard about her performance were curious and eager to see her in person. They asked the baristas and staff about the young woman who had captivated the audience with her piano playing. Even the regulars who had once overlooked her began to treat her with a new kind of respect, curious to see the talent behind the quiet waitress. She arrived at the cafe early, carrying herself with quiet confidence. Her family and friends had been supportive, calling and sending messages of congratulations. She smiled politely at everyone she greeted, but inside, she felt a sense of wonder and disbelief. The world had shifted overnight, and she was still adjusting to the attention she was receiving. For years, she had been invisible, her talent hidden from the world. Now people were watching, and she realized that nothing would ever be the same again. Her co-workers, however, reacted differently. Some were amazed and offered genuine congratulations, while others whispered and exchanged looks of envy. They had mocked her in the past, laughed at her quiet nature and dreams of music, and now they had to admit that she had outshone them in a way they could not ignore. She noticed their glances but did not let them affect her. She had learned that their opinions had never mattered and would not matter now. The cafe owner, who had often been skeptical about her dedication to music, approached her with a warm smile. He complimented her performance and told her that her dedication and talent were truly exceptional. He even suggested that she consider performing at other events, promising to support her in any way he could. She thanked him, feeling a sense of gratitude that her hard work was finally being recognized, not just by strangers but by those who had known her for years. As the day went on, she went about her work with ease, serving customers and handling orders as she always had. But there was a new energy in the air, a sense of possibility and excitement that she had never experienced before. Every smile, every kind word, every look of admiration reminded her that her dream was no longer just a secret hope. It was becoming a reality. She felt a lightness in her step, a joy that came from knowing that her talent was finally seen and appreciated. Meanwhile, the invitations to perform continued to arrive. Local event organizers, musicians, and even some schools reached out, eager to have her play at their gatherings. She read through the messages carefully, feeling both excitement and nervousness. Each opportunity was a chance to share her music with more people, to inspire and move others with the stories she told through her piano. She realized that the ridicule of the past had been a stepping stone, shaping her resilience and determination. One afternoon, as she prepared for another performance, she sat at the piano in the cafe before the event. Her fingers hovered over the keys, remembering the countless hours she had spent practicing in secret. She closed her eyes and let the music flow, allowing herself to be fully present in the moment. The melodies carried her away, filling her with a sense of freedom and purpose. In that quiet space, she felt the power of her talent and the depth of her journey. When she arrived at the new venue, she was greeted warmly by the organizers and introduced to the audience. The room was filled with people who had heard of her previous performance, and their anticipation was palpable. She felt a brief flicker of nervousness, but she reminded herself that she had faced doubt before and had emerged stronger each time. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The audience was immediately captivated. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, each note precise and full of emotion. The music told stories of struggle, hope, and triumph, and the listeners were drawn in, unable to look away. She played with confidence, letting her passion guide every movement. The skepticism that some guests may have carried faded, replaced by awe and admiration. She realized that her music had the power to reach hearts and minds, to connect with people in a way that words could not. After the performance, the applause was overwhelming. People stood and clapped, some wiping tears from their eyes, others exchanging impressed glances. She smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment and joy. For the first time, she understood that her talent was not just a personal gift, but a gift to share with the world. The recognition was not about proving anyone wrong. It was about expressing herself and touching others through her music. Back at the cafe, the story of her performances spread quickly. More customers came to watch her play during quiet moments, and the atmosphere of the cafe shifted. It became a place not just for coffee and pastries, but for music, inspiration, and admiration. She continued to serve with her usual grace, but now there was a subtle pride in the way she carried herself, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken and the talent she possessed. Her family continued to support her, proud of her accomplishments and the recognition she had earned. They often attended her performances, their faces glowing with pride and joy. Her friends celebrated with her, sharing in her excitement and encouraging her to pursue every opportunity that came her way. The ridicule she had faced in the past became a distant memory, a reminder of the obstacles she had overcome and the strength she had gained. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a local event, she returned home and reflected on her journey. She thought about the years she had spent waiting tables, practicing in secret, and enduring ridicule from those who did not understand her dreams. She realized that every challenge, every moment of doubt, had led her to this point. Her talent had been recognized, her voice had been heard, and her music had touched the hearts of many. As she prepared for the next performance, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that the journey was far from over, and that there were many more audiences to reach, many more stories to tell through her music. But she also knew that she had grown stronger, more confident, and more determined with each step she had taken. The ridicule and doubt of the past had shaped her, but they no longer held power over her. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a force to be recognized and admired. The cafe continued to be a place of work and practice, but now it also became a place of inspiration. Customers came not just for food and drink, but to witness her talent and feel the energy of her music. The atmosphere was transformed, filled with anticipation, admiration, and a sense of possibility. She moved through her days with a quiet joy, knowing that her dedication and perseverance had led to this moment of recognition and respect. With each new performance, she grew more confident, more expressive, and more connected to her audience. Her music became a bridge between her past struggles and her present triumphs, a way to share her journey and inspire others. She realized that the ridicule and doubt she had faced were not barriers, but lessons that had prepared her for the opportunities she now embraced. The young waitress who had once been overlooked was now a musician whose talent could not be ignored, and she embraced this new chapter of her life with grace, humility, and unwavering determination. The invitations kept coming, each one a new chance for her to show the world the music that had lived inside her for so long. She traveled to halls and small theaters, each different from the last, yet each carrying the same excitement and nervous energy. The feeling of stepping onto a stage never became ordinary. Every time she sat at the piano, her heart would race, her fingers tingling with anticipation. But she knew the music was part of her soul, and the moment her hands touched the keys, she was ready. Her reputation began to grow. People spoke of the young woman who had once worked as a waitress but could play the piano with such mastery that even the most experienced musicians were left in awe. Newspapers and social media mentioned her, but she remained humble, preferring the quiet satisfaction of her craft over the attention it brought. She understood that the music was more important than fame. It was a story, a connection, and an expression of everything she had lived through. At one event, she noticed a group of influential musicians watching her intently. They were the kind of people who had performed on grand stages and traveled the world with their music. Initially, she felt a flicker of self-doubt, wondering if she truly belonged among them. But as her fingers moved across the keys, all doubt vanished. She poured her heart into each note, her passion and experience shining through, and the audience, including these seasoned musicians, could not help but be captivated. The crowd's reaction was always the same. Disbelief turned into awe, whispers turning into applause, skeptics becoming admirers. She had learned to expect this reaction, and yet, it never lost its power to thrill her. Each performance was a reminder of how far she had come. From the small cafe where she had been ridiculed to stages where her talent was celebrated. The transformation was not just in the eyes of others, but in her own sense of self. She no longer questioned her worth. She knew it. After one particularly large event, a group of young students approached her. They were studying music and had heard about her performances. Their eyes were wide with admiration and curiosity, and they asked questions about how she had learned, how she had practiced, and how she had remained so determined despite ridicule. She spoke gently and humbly, sharing stories of long hours at the piano, encouragement from her family, and the quiet perseverance that had guided her. They listened intently, inspired by her journey, and she realized that her story could encourage others to follow their own dreams. Not everyone had been supportive, of course. There were still occasional whispers of envy, some people questioning whether her rapid rise was deserved or luck. She had learned to ignore these murmurs, focusing instead on the genuine joy of playing and the lives she could touch with her music. Every challenge she had faced had strengthened her, and she understood that criticism was a part of the path for anyone who dared to shine. One evening, after a performance at a local community hall, she returned to her dressing room and sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on the journey. Her hands rested on the keys, not to play, but to feel the connection she had always had with music. She thought about the years she had spent serving tables, enduring mockery, and practicing in secret. Each memory was a part of the foundation that had brought her to this moment. Without those struggles, she might not have developed the depth, patience, and emotion that now defined her performances. Her family celebrated her achievements with quiet pride. They accompanied her to performances, applauding every note and cheering her on from the audience. Their support was constant, a reminder that she was never truly alone in her journey. Her friends shared in her excitement, often helping her prepare for events or spreading the word about her upcoming performances. She realized that success was not just about talent, but about the network of love and encouragement that had surrounded her, even when the world outside seemed indifferent. At one prestigious event, she found herself performing in front of a renowned conductor. He had a reputation for being strict and exacting, often known to dismiss new talent easily. She felt a moment of nervousness but reminded herself that she had faced doubt before and emerged stronger. As she began to play, the hall grew quiet, every ear listening intently. Her music carried a depth of feeling and technical skill that was impossible to ignore. Even the conductor, who had initially been skeptical, could not hide his astonishment. Her fingers danced over the keys with grace and precision, telling a story that went beyond notes and chords. When the final note lingered in the hall, there was a moment of silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then, the applause erupted, overwhelming and full of admiration. The conductor nodded, his eyes wide with respect, acknowledging her talent with a quiet, approving gesture. She smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. She had not only performed beautifully, but she had also earned the respect of someone whose opinion mattered deeply in the world of music. With each performance, she became more confident and expressive. She experimented with new pieces, challenging herself to explore different styles and techniques. Each stage became a classroom, each audience a source of feedback and energy. She learned to trust her instincts, allowing her emotions to guide her hands. And in doing so, her music became even more captivating and authentic. The young woman who had once been ridiculed in a small cafe was now inspiring others. Students, young musicians, and even seasoned professionals looked to her as an example of perseverance, humility, and talent. She shared her story openly, talking about the struggles, the ridicule, and the hours of practice that had shaped her. People listened, inspired to pursue their own passions despite obstacles and doubt. In her quiet moments, she often returned to the cafe piano, playing for herself and anyone who happened to be there. These sessions were not about recognition or applause, but about connection and reflection. She remembered the early days, the moments of ridicule, and the quiet encouragement that had kept her going. Sitting at the piano in the familiar setting of the cafe reminded her of her roots, grounding her in the journey she had traveled and the growth she had achieved. She began to understand that her music was more than just talent. It was a story, a bridge between her past and the future, and a way to inspire others. Every note she played carried the weight of her experiences, the joy of her triumphs, and the lessons learned from her struggles. She realized that her journey was not just about personal success, but about touching lives and showing that resilience and dedication could overcome even the harshest ridicule. As she prepared for each new performance, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her journey was far from over, and that there were still countless audiences to reach and hearts to touch. Each invitation was a chance to share her music, her story, and her passion. The ridicule she had faced in the past was now a distant memory, replaced by admiration, respect, and the knowledge that she had earned her place in the world of music. She had transformed from a quiet waitress into a musician whose talent could not be ignored, and she embraced this new chapter of her life with humility, grace, and determination. The young woman's journey had taken her far beyond the small cafe where she had once worked, but the memories of those early days remained close to her heart. She often thought back to the long hours of serving coffee and pastries, the whispered mockery from coworkers, and the moments of doubt when she questioned whether her dream was possible. Those challenges, once heavy and discouraging, had shaped her into the musician she had become. They had taught her patience, resilience, and the quiet determination that now defined her. She continued to perform at events of all sizes, from intimate gatherings in local community halls to grand concerts attended by critics, musicians, and enthusiasts. Each audience brought its own energy, and she learned to read the room, letting her fingers and heart guide every performance. She understood that music was not just about technical skill. It was about emotion, connection, and the ability to tell a story that words could not convey. And she had a story to tell, one that had begun in hardship and had blossomed into triumph. Despite her growing recognition, she remained humble. Fame and applause were gratifying, but they were not the reason she played. Her music was an extension of herself, a reflection of her journey, and a way to touch the hearts of others. She remembered the faces of those who had mocked her, the customers who had laughed at her quiet demeanor, and the colleagues who had doubted her. Instead of resentment, she felt gratitude. They had challenged her, and in doing so, they had pushed her to work harder, to perfect her craft, and to believe in herself even when the world did not. One afternoon, she returned to the cafe where it all began. The familiar smell of coffee and the soft hum of conversation greeted her like old friends. She walked past the tables where she had once served, her eyes taking in the space that had witnessed the start of her journey. Sitting at the piano in the corner, she allowed herself a moment to play for herself, without an audience, without expectation. The music flowed effortlessly, each note a reminder of how far she had come and the strength she had gained along the way. Customers began to notice her playing, and soon a small crowd gathered. Some had heard of her performances, others were curious, and a few had been there when she was just another quiet waitress. The atmosphere was different now, filled with admiration and respect. She smiled gently, letting the music speak for her, just as it had always done. In those moments, she realized that her journey was not only about personal success, but also about inspiring others to believe in their own talents, no matter the obstacles they faced. Word of her continued success reached the local community, and soon she was invited to mentor young musicians. She welcomed these opportunities, seeing them as a way to give back and guide others who, like her, had dreams that seemed distant or unattainable. She shared her story openly, emphasizing the importance of perseverance, dedication, and self-belief. Her students listened with wide eyes and eager hearts, absorbing every lesson, every encouragement, and every anecdote from her journey. She understood the power of representation and the impact that seeing someone who had once struggled could have on those who were just beginning their paths. In time, she began to receive invitations from larger venues, prestigious orchestras, and even international events. The shy, quiet waitress who had once blended into the background was now a name people spoke with reverence. Yet, despite all the opportunities, she remained grounded. She remembered her roots, the family who supported her, the friends who encouraged her, and the cafe that had been her first stage. These memories kept her humble and focused, reminding her of the importance of staying true to herself. During one significant performance at a renowned music festival, she felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The hall was filled with music lovers, critics, and experienced musicians. As she sat at the piano, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes, letting the music take over. Each note, each melody was infused with emotion, reflecting the hardships, victories, and dreams that had shaped her. The audience was silent, completely absorbed, and she felt the connection between the music and the hearts of those listening. It was a powerful, moving experience that she would carry with her forever. After the performance, the applause was overwhelming. People approached her, expressing admiration, sharing stories of how her music had moved them, and offering opportunities for collaboration. She smiled, graciously accepting compliments and guidance, but her mind remained focused on the essence of her journey. The recognition, while gratifying, was secondary to the joy of creating and sharing music. She had learned that true fulfillment came from the act of expressing oneself, not merely from the praise it generated. Back home, she often reflected on the transformation in her life. She had gone from being ridiculed and underestimated to becoming a musician whose talent commanded respect and admiration. She understood that this journey had not been about proving others wrong, but about proving to herself that her dreams were valid and achievable. The obstacles she faced had strengthened her, and the journey had shaped her into a person capable of inspiring and guiding others. In the quiet moments between performances, she continued to practice and explore new pieces. She experimented with different styles, challenging herself to grow and evolve as a musician. Her dedication never wavered, and her love for music remained as vibrant as ever. She knew that each note played, each melody shared, was a step further along her journey, a chance to connect with others, and an opportunity to leave a lasting impact. Her story became well known, not just for her musical talent but also for her resilience and determination. People admired the young woman who had faced ridicule and emerged stronger, whose quiet strength had transformed into inspiring artistry. She gave interviews, shared her experiences, and encouraged others to pursue their dreams relentlessly. Her message was simple. Talent is only part of the journey. Perseverance, humility, and self-belief are just as important. She often returned to the small cafe where her journey began, playing the old piano for those who had once ignored her. It was a full-circle moment, a reminder of how far she had come and the importance of remembering her roots. Customers listened in awe, some moved to tears, and she played with the same passion and authenticity as she did on the grand stages. The cafe had become a symbol of her journey, a place where dreams, talent, and determination had converged to create something extraordinary. Through her performances, mentoring, and public appearances, she continued to inspire countless individuals. Her story was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of believing in oneself, and the transformative impact of following one's passion. She had shown that even when the world ridiculed or underestimated someone, perseverance, dedication, and talent could lead to remarkable success and recognition. As she looked toward the future, she remained focused on her growth as a musician and as a person. She understood that her journey was ongoing, filled with new opportunities, challenges, and experiences. The ridicule she had once endured was now a distant memory, replaced by the respect and admiration she had earned through her dedication and talent. She embraced her journey fully, knowing that every step, every note, and every performance was part of a larger story, one that continued to unfold with each day. In the end, the young woman who had once been a quiet waitress, underestimated and mocked by many, had become a symbol of hope and inspiration. Her music reached far beyond the walls of any cafe or concert hall, touching lives, inspiring dreams, and proving that perseverance and passion can overcome even the harshest obstacles. She had transformed her life through dedication, humility, and unwavering belief in her talent, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The applause, admiration, and recognition she received were not the end, but a continuation of a journey defined by resilience, growth, and the beauty of sharing one's true self with the world.